Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Talking with Dr. Donna. I'm your host, Dr. Donna White Carey, and I thank you for keeping your appointment tonight. As you know, we have an appointment every single Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So thank you again for keeping your appointment with the doctor tonight. If you are not already a subscriber, I would really appreciate it if you learned anything new tonight or appreciated anything and any information that I have given, that you would go over to YouTube if you're watching from a different channel, and you would hit that big old red subscribe button and you would subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. If you are already a subscriber, thank you. And thank you for being a part of the Generational Health Network. Now you might say, well, what in the world is generational health? Well, we have 4 pillars of health that we pay attention to. The first pillar is spiritual health. Then we look at emotional and mental health. We look at physical health, and we look at environmental health. I am convinced that if we look at these 4 pillars of health, we are going to be able to impact the cycle and end the cycle of premature death in Black communities in the United States and across the diaspora. So let's get started tonight. We are going to do a segment that I call Need to Know. This is what is a hot topic and something you need to know about this week. So let's get to it. The first thing that you need to know is that the pandemic is not over. Let me repeat that. The pandemic is not over. We are seeing a doubling and tripling of case rate in some areas. We're hearing about super spreader events at schools and proms and other events. We're seeing an uptick in the number of people who are being hospitalized, and we're still seeing high rates of people who are dying from this disease. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there is a resurgence of COVID in the community? Does it mean that we have a higher incidence of COVID in the community? Probably not. I think that we are just getting caught slipping. Remember when we first were understanding that we were in the midst of a pandemic, that we had this new virus that was infecting and impacting our communities? And we urged you to do 4 things. We urged you to wash or sanitize your hands frequently. We urged you to keep some distance between you and others and recommended about 6 feet. And we recommended kind of keeping yourself in a tight bubble so that you didn't hang out with just a number of different people, but just a small group of people, same people. Remember when we told you to wear a mask at all times, whether you were indoors and outdoors? And then we recommended that you get vaccinated. Well, those four things that we asked of you to do at the very beginning of the pandemic, we have stopped doing those things. And so my theory is not that there is more COVID in the community, but that we have lessened our defenses. We have let our guards down. And because of that, we have decreased our protection. And the virus is now infecting other people. We're seeing cases exploding of the 18 to 30-year-olds and in the age group of 0 to 18-year-olds. We always saw a higher rate in the 18 to 30-year-olds, but we're now just exploding in that category, but also looking at our younger children, and in particular, our school-age children, elementary, middle, and high school. We're seeing schools having high rates of COVID, because we have allowed our masks to come off, we are allowed events to start to occur, and we are no longer doing those 4 really vital things that we recommended at the very beginning of the pandemic. We're also seeing cases increasing in people who are vaccinated. Now, you might say, oh, well, that means that the vaccines aren't working. Not really. We've been encouraging people to get a booster because at the very beginning, when we gave vaccines, we said we're not quite sure how long these vaccines are going to last. We're probably going to need to give you a booster so that it bumps up your body's ability to fight off the virus. And we're at that point. We have recommended a booster for after 4 to 6 months. And now we're on our second round of boosters because we're continuing to see cases of COVID in our community. We know the disease hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't left. And so we need to continue to get boosted. We need to continue to get the vaccine. If you have not had a booster in the last 4 to 6 months, I recommend that you get a booster right now. If you have not already gotten your first doses of your vaccine, stop waiting. Please get your vaccine. The other thing that we're seeing with COVID is that it is especially hitting harder in communities like the Asian Pacific Island community, where the initial vaccine rates were low, and the vaccine booster rates are low. So when we look at that, we're seeing once again that vaccines are protective. In communities where vaccines and boosters are abundant, cases are lower. Now, you might have noticed on the graph that we showed when we looked at vaccines, and we saw the yellow line in the very peak in the early part of the year. There was a huge peak and surge between those folks who were unvaccinated, that's that yellow line, and the people who were vaccinated in terms of their case rates. And so, again, you might say, well, this now, when the lines are closer, the yellow line is closer to the black line. That means that everyone is sort of getting the virus at the same sort of rate. It's because those of us who are vaccinated have not gotten our boosters. And so we are not as protected as we once were. So what is it that you need to know? We still have high cases of COVID in the community. Over 1 million lives lost because of this pandemic. Over 200,000 children have lost their caregivers, mothers, fathers, grandparents, guardians who are taking care of them. This is not a joke. The pandemic is not over. We definitely need to go back to wearing our masks. I really disagreed with public health departments across this country that said it's okay to take your mask off, because it has not been okay, and we are now seeing that it's not okay. We lost protection. So please protect yourself and wear your mask, whether you're indoors or outdoors. Try to keep that social bubble small. Give yourself some distance. And of course, continue to wash your hands and sanitize, just like we were doing the very beginning of this horrible pandemic. The pandemic is not over. Here's the second thing that I want you to know about tonight. You may have been watching the news and heard about these cases of hepatitis in kids. And you might be saying, well, is this something new? Don't kids get hepatitis? Don't adults get hepatitis? What is it? So what is it about these cases of hepatitis that's newsworthy? Well, let me tell you. There are hepatitis cases that are across the world, including the United States. This type of hepatitis, which is sort of a mysterious new type of hepatitis because we really don't know what's causing it. But what we do know is that kids who are getting this type of hepatitis get sick extremely quickly, and they get significant illness. Some of these kids have needed liver transplants. Can you imagine a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old needing a transplant of their liver? And some of these kids are even dying. So that's why this is a need to know tonight. I want you to understand what is hepatitis and what to look for in hepatitis. So, what is hepatitis? Hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver. That means your liver is swollen. That means there is a bunch of different types of cells that come into the liver, take over the normal anatomy of the liver so that the things that your liver is normally supposed to do, it's unable to do because it's sort of been invaded by these inflammatory cells. And usually hepatitis is caused by a virus. And you're right. When you thought about, I've heard about hepatitis. You're right. We have hepatitis A through E. But there are also other types of viruses that cause hepatitis. The chickenpox virus can cause hepatitis. Rubella can cause hepatitis. We have vaccines against both of those illnesses to help to prevent that type of hepatitis. We also have vaccines against hepatitis A and hepatitis B, right? So we have vaccines that help so that you don't get these diseases that cause this type of hepatitis. Hepatitis can also be caused by a virus called adenovirus. And adenovirus is the virus that typically causes the common cold. And so when they're looking at these new cases of hepatitis, about half of the kids who are testing positive for hepatitis are testing positive for adenovirus. But you know what the other half is testing positive for? That's right, coronavirus. And that makes sense, right? That we just had a pandemic that swept across the entire world. And now we're seeing hepatitis across the entire world. Coincidence? I think not. We don't know if the cause of this type of hepatitis is a symptom of long COVID. This is what we were kind of talking about when we said we have no idea what COVID can do and what it will do. And this is why we continue to encourage people to not be flippant about just getting COVID, particularly in our young kids. And most of the kids who are getting this type of hepatitis are too young to get vaccinated. They're less than the age of 5. And most of our vaccines right now that we have for coronavirus are for kids 5 and up. The majority, sort of the average age of the kids who are getting this type of hepatitis is around 2 years old. That means we have 2-year-old babies who are getting so sick that they may need a liver transplant because potentially of this virus, coronavirus. That's why it's important that we continue to be vigilant, not just for ourselves, but for our children. So what do you look for to see if your child might have hepatitis? Well, there's some non-specific symptoms that may take a minute for you to realize that your child is even sick. Sometimes there's a fever, sometimes there's a rash. Your child may say that they're feeling tired, or you're noticing that they're sleeping more. Maybe they're not eating in the same way. Their appetite is different. It's less, it's changed. You know, those general symptoms that you see, my kid is just not feeling well. Those are some non-specific symptoms. So pay attention to those non-specific symptoms in your kids. Those symptoms, you don't necessarily want to rush them to the emergency room or rush them to their doctors for, but there's definitely some symptoms to look for in your kids regarding this hepatitis that if you see it, I want you to drop everything that you're doing and take your child to be examined. Number one is if you see the yellowing in the whites of their eyes. The whites of their eyes are no longer white, but they're slightly yellow. Or you can also see it on their skin. Now, we commonly refer to that as jaundice, and the jaundice can be in your skin or it can be in your eyes. It's harder, of course, if you have a darker skin, more melanated, to actually see yellowing of the skin. So usually you see it in the eyes first. So look in the whites of the eyes, and if you see the whites of your child's eyes turning yellow, that is a sign that something serious is going on, and I really want you to take your child in. The other thing you can look at is urine. If you notice that the urine is turning a darker yellow, again, that's that same process of the eyes turning a little yellow. We can see that yellowing or darkening in the urine. And then I want you to look at their poop. And I know in 2-year-olds, they're kind of independently, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds independently going to the bathroom, so you may not check those stools. But if you can, check them out. And if you notice that they're a little gray, they're a little light, they look a little blanched, that's again another sign that says, something may be going on with my child and I need to get my child checked out. Hepatitis is a serious, serious illness, and we're seeing it in more and more children because we are just coming out of a pandemic. So I want you to pay attention to your children. I want you to also think about protecting them in the same way that you protect yourself from this virus, which is having them wear a mask, having them to wash their hands regularly, keeping them away from large crowds and lots of people. Okay? All right. So those are what you need to know this week. Thank you again for watching. Until we see each other Thursday at 6:30 p.m., you have an appointment with the doctor. You take care of yourself and your families.